Viewer discretion is advised.
Yotes, remember that time your assistant coach was betting on games and taking action while he was on the sidelines? You remember that guy? Oh, shit, he's your coach now. You had to have a fan rush down to your city council meeting to bitch about how they are treated, and you filed for bankruptcy in 2009. And this year you made a lot of what looked like good moves out in the desert, and you still suck. And hey, you might turn the franchise around, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Andrew Barroway is a hedge fund manager who bought a large stake of the Coyotes in 2014. Then it looked like he was going to be thrown out as the owner, and then he ended up buying 54% of the team. He might just be a fictional character the Coyotes created so that someone could take the fall for the team going bankrupt. For all we know, Barroway could just be pretending to be an owner, just like the Yotes are pretending to be an NHL squad.
A shack not without controversy. Gila River Arena saw its contract with the city of Glendale terminated in 2015. A deal was signed days later, but the team is on a year-to-year lease with the city, and Bettman threatened to move the team if a new deal isn't passed. It still hasn't. Probably the only thing keeping the Yotes in the desert is Bettman's limp threats and the fact he really doesn't have a place to put them other than Seattle. The score was 2-1 after the first period, but then the North Stars roared to within 1 goal of the NHL record in a game. Amazingly, the Jets had 42 shots on goal, but they didn't go in. Bobby Smith scored 4 goals and had 3 assists for the Stars.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't get him to drink. In this case, the NHL just dragged a dead horse out to the middle of the fucking desert and hoped to God that it would sprout into a utopia. This is the woe of the Arizona Coyotes, a team moved from Winnipeg in the mid-1990s in an attempt to take advantage of a stable American dollar and a massive population boom in Phoenix. One little problem in hindsight, most of those transplants really don't give a shit about the local teams. That's why the Cardinals, Diamondbacks, and Suns have all struggled to fill their stadiums at some point in time. The Coyotes are the most pathetic of this bunch. It's so bad that they can't even get a stable owner out there. It's been nothing but financial bloodletting and a prolonged game of executive hot potato, seeing who's going to be holding this botch of a franchise. Even with all of this bullshit, the team has been stuck in Glendale for at least 5 years too long. The answer to this quandary lies in good old Gary Bettman, destroyer of the hopes and dreams of hockey fans everywhere. He and his cronies have been steadfast in keeping this franchise afloat in Arizona, regardless of the cost. It's like they can't admit yet another failure in their expansion efforts. I feel that they still can't get past the shame of their venture into Atlanta falling apart. Arizona is simply their god emperor, a dying hamster on life support, pumping endless cash and thousands of sacrifices into its survival for reasons of more expansion. Even if the whole situation is a disaster, a winning franchise always endears itself to the locals. Have the Coyotes succeeded in this? Fuck no. The best that this team has accomplished in its time in Phoenix has been pulling a conference finals appearance out of their ass one year. That's it. I've watched this team in person over the past few years, and holy shit, this team is bad. Like, not even the so bad it's hilarious to watch bad, just fucking bad. Most of the current iteration of Coyotes are either way too young and underdeveloped, mediocre entities, players struggling under Dave Tippett's system, or just complete and utter trash. When a fossilized version of Shane Doan is one of your showcased players, you might as well just send out Morse code for emergency assistance immediately. I feel bad for Max Domi and Ekman Larson. They don't deserve this. This team didn't just scrape the iceberg, they slammed right into it repeatedly. This is a team so grossly inept that they decided to bring in Wayne Gretzky as a head coach. Because as we all know, being one of the best players in the game immediately translates into success as a manager. What also translates into instant success is being a 27-year-old wunderkind who has no managerial experience but a shit ton of knowledge in rather primitive hockey analytics. Say hello to John Chaika, the new GM at the helm for the Coyotes. His concept is to take on dead contracts like Dave Boland and Pavel Datsyuk to get more picks and prospects. This year is the tank year for the team, so it's way too early to tell what this guy could be. Maybe he thinks he can cheese the system like those old NHL franchise modes where you can amass an all-star team and every first-round pick by a shitload of trades. Or I could be totally wrong and they'll be hockey gods in 5 years. If the Philadelphia 76ers are the example to go by, they're a golden lolcow in the making. For now, though, it's a wait-and-see approach. This team has gobs of potential, both in terms of being a playoff contender and being a lolcow. There has been only one positive out of having a team here: Austin Matthews. Otherwise, the venture to Phoenix has been a disaster. I see more antics from the NHL in desperately trying to keep the team here, but I can't believe they'd be that stupid. What could they do, repeat the same fuck-up in a similar location?
Vegas Golden Knights!
Well then.
Rick Tocchet is a gambling man. Well, he likes to run gambling rings, which he did as an assistant coach for the Yotes in 2007. I guess gambling isn't a big deal to the NHL, as Tocchet is now the Coyotes coach 10 years later. Also, a leopard can't change its spots. The Yotes were accused of tampering with draft picks in 2020. Not as famous as another desert dog that chases road runners, Howler is an accomplished drummer who actually plays a few gigs with local bands. Hey, did you hear about the band that locked their keys in their van? They had to break the window to get the drummer out. Sorry, had to. Howler has been known to drop buckets on people and sweat every time he goes to deposit his paycheck. If there ever was a building that personified the most bizarre dispute between a team and a city, it's Gila Arena. It's no secret that the Arizona Coyotes have, much like the ice they play on, struggled to find a home in the desert. Opened in 2003, Gila River Arena was a better suited venue for the NHL, as it was configured for hockey. After multiple ownership changes, threats of relocation, and missed rent and tax payments, it was the city of Glendale that kicked out the Coyotes in 2021, forcing them to find a new home. Their solution will be to temporarily move into ASU's new multi-purpose arena, which boasts a capacity of 5,000 and looks smaller than Donald Trump's hands. Yep, the Yotes plan to crash on their college friend's couch until either a new arena in Tempe is built or they can hitchhike out of town. Gila River Arena will likely remain open as an event center, but will no longer host major sports next year. Looking for a new apartment, Arizona Coyotes. The Arizona Coyotes have actually already moved, with them signing a 3-year lease in the 5,000-seat Arizona State University Arena in Tempe. Yes, you heard that correctly. NHL hockey is going to be played in an arena that only sits 5,000 people. What's more unclear than that bizarre move is what will happen after. Let's do some simple math. The cost for a family of 4 to attend a Yotes game is a league low $314. That's including parking and food. Divide 5,000 by 4, that's 1,250 families. Multiply that by $314 and you get $392,500 in single game gate receipts. Multiply that by 81 games, that's only $31 million. The cap hit for the Yotes next year is a projected $64 million. So even if they sold out every game, this is simply unsustainable. The Coyotes could move to Houston, Kansas City, Quebec City, or possibly patch things up with Glendale, but that would require a cash infusion to pay off old debts. What a freaking mess.
I talked about this team as one of my first sports vids. The Arizona Coyotes were terrible. They were at the bottom of the league, as usual, and were undergoing another round of perpetual rebuilding. But this time was different. Arizona underwent a conversion, and it was in the form of an analytical altar. John Chayka was one of the budding minds in the newfound scene of hockey analytics, and hopes were high for the Coyotes. Years of ineptitude and ownership turmoils aside, the Coyotes were turning a new leaf. Seriously, there's nowhere to go but up. How can this honestly get any worse? Yeah, you've learned absolutely nothing. So the Coyotes. Maybe Pierre Dorian needs to license out his famous quotes, since all I can say about them is that they are a team. They ran around in circles for the last 4 years. And it's not only led them to the same situation they were in, but now it's tethered down to quicksand. A team wrought by years of managerial mistakes will have to dig through more years of managerial mistakes. I know what you're thinking. What the hell happened this time? Quite a bit, but the main issue here is analytic wonder boy himself. You've heard the story too many times. Hotshot startup executive promises the world to investors, but is either too inexperienced, unskilled, and/or arrogant to execute on the vision. The company goes tits up in a few years, they produce nothing but smoke and mirrors, and people are out billions of dollars. That executive is Cheka, hockey's version of a snake oil salesman. Despite his past experience in hockey analytics, if you actually look at the moves he's made as GM of the Coyotes, they have nothing to do with any sort of analytics. The basic gist of analytics is to use data to find undervalued commodities and sign them at value to have peak efficiency as a team on the ice, to discover things that can't be seen with the eye. His early moves seem to be veering in this direction, bringing in Alex Goligoski, trading for Nicholas Yalmars, and acquiring futures for eating dead contracts. Not bad for early moves, but the big acquisition at the time was trading for Derek Stepan and Antti Ranta. Stepan was owed big money but would fill a needed hole on the second line. Antti Ranta, a pure analytics move. Undervalued thanks to being a backup to King Henrik. Trading a first in Tony DeAngelo is steep but worth it, at least for one part. Ranta has been excellent for the Yotes and is still useful for the team despite being usurped from the top goaltending role. Stepan? He regressed. Hard. Probably just bad luck, let's move on. As time passed, he would get bolder and bolder with his moves. One of the big ones was moving on from Max Domi. He was struggling immensely and needed a change of scenery. You know who else did? Alex Galchenyuk, the famed whipping boy of the Canadiens. A one-for-one deal commenced. Here's the issue. Banking on reclamation projects and hoping they return to form are not analytical moves. That's based on gut feelings and projection, once again defies database beliefs. It blew up spectacularly in Arizona's face. Max Domi returned to form and had a career season in Montreal. Galchenyuk, he became the Sam Bradford of hockey. One of these days he'll fulfill his potential. You'll see, he just needs more time. And with that, someone else would take a chance on him as Cheka doubles down. Phil Kessel is the analytical equivalent of a donut. He puts up goals and points, but he's an empty calorie scorer. He's useless in 2 of the 3 zones, he requires a shit ton of power play time, and he goes through long stretches where he's invisible on the ice. The base numbers look good, but they're hollow. John Chayka did not acquire Kessel because of analytics. He acquired him because he's buddies with Rick Tocchet. It doesn't take a genius to say that this move went against every damn rule in the book. Not to mention they added one of their better prospects in return for him. Take a guess as to what happened. He was completely invisible on the ice last year. He didn't even put up points, he just took up space. But what if I were to tell you that wasn't all he did? Chayka's biggest downfall was in his young prospect pool. In moves more fitting of Sahara Las Vegas, he gambled on player development and potential of 4 of these players. For a team that's been notorious for bad player development. Fuck the bridge deals, just throw big contracts at them. This is a big no-no in analytics. Analytics does not care for the idea of a good player. They just want good players who can perform at that level now. Throwing over $7 million per year for 8 years at Clayton Keller for 1 year isn't analytics. That's paying for the idea of a franchise center. Lo and behold, since the contract was signed, Keller stalled out. He isn't even playing center on the Coyotes these days. The contract looks terrible. Nick Schmaltz and Christian Dvorak were extended long-term on the idea that they would become top-flight forwards, not what they were at the time of signing. Speaking of Schmaltz, Dylan Strome was incredibly underwhelming in Arizona, yet immediately panned out when he was traded to Chicago. This seems to be a trend. The only one of these extensions that panned out was Jacob Chychrun, and that's because he's developed properly. More shocking than Chayka's actions. The only one worth extending to a huge deal at the time of signing was Oliver Ekman-Larsson, mostly due to his performance being worth it. These kind of defensemen don't grow on trees, and he was rewarded for it, as analytics justifies. So I may be saying this with some hesitation. There's a good reason for it. OEL, since the time pen was put to paper, has suffered massive regression. Even for not being 30, it looks to be one of the worst contracts in hockey at this time. It's gotten so bad that Arizona tried to offload him this offseason. But they demanded too much and nobody bit. Even for Vancouver or Boston, they don't want to risk a huge cap hit on the idea of a top-pairing defenseman. There are cheaper and arguably better options on the open market, which leads to the most damning indictment of Chayka's tenure as a so-called analytical guru. They're slammed up against the salary cap. A team that is in the middle of a rebuild and was floating near the cap floor a few years ago should not be locked into this kind of borderline cap hell. Even worse, the Coyotes have trouble scoring goals and have to rely on goaltending playing balls out to win games. This isn't sustainable. This is the kind of shit you'd expect from Chiarelli, not a proclaimed analytics guy. The previous season might fool you a bit since they won a playoff series for the first time in over 3,000 days. Darcy Kemper, a Chayka acquisition played out of his fucking mind. They might re-sign their new acquisition in Taylor Hall, their biggest buy on the market in years. I'd share your optimism, but the team suffered a hard collapse deep into February, and the only reason they made the playoffs was due to a pandemic. They wouldn't have been here in a traditional season. Also, the moment they faced a team that didn't shit their pants, they got their intestines ripped out of both orifices. It's hollow like Chayka's lip service to analytics. The only way this could get worse is if he openly shamed the organization. Wouldn't you take a wild guess as to what happened? He needs that analytical edge on his competition. So what if hosting your own draft prospect workouts are illegal by NHL bylaws? They need the data that the Combine cannot provide. Like having prospects work out in shorts and a t-shirt and dyeing up their bodies. Peak analytics. Once Chayka got word that the league was investigating him for these shenanigans, he knew his time was up. He may have just been extended by the team, doesn't matter. He got the fuck out of Dodge before the hammer could fall on him. It's the mark of a grifter, and Chayka played it to perfection. Arizona was punished hard, losing a second-round pick in 2020 and their first in 2021. They had traded their first in 2020 for Taylor Hall, and their third that year for Carl Soderberg. I reckon analytics didn't like this outcome either. But at least the ownership situation is solid for once. Alex Morello was openly vetted by Bettman as a stable cornerstone of the franchise. Even better, it makes inroads with the Latino community, so new paths to fandom are open. What happened here? Nothing much, just a pandemic that fucked over a good few industries. Bad luck for Morello, a good chunk of his money and revenue is based in casinos. Guess what's taken a beating since COVID? Casinos. Vegas has had some stiff restrictions as well, so it's a lot like being shanked and gutted in a public display. It affected the Coyotes. Throughout their time in the bubble, there were grumblings of delays in payment of per diems and bonuses to players. Regardless of circumstance, it's a terrible look. And it might not get any better until the country fully reopens and people go out in droves again. Now, the only way this could get worse is if they draft a literal piece of shit with their first pick in the draft. I'll give you a few moments to guess as to what happened. Mitchell Miller isn't just any plain old piece of shit. He's a guy who physically and psychologically tormented a black disabled kid for years. When you are summoned to juvenile court for said dehumanization, all pity is off the table. The dude hasn't even shown remorse for his actions. And he had been taken off more than a few teams' draft boards as a result. The Coyotes still drafted him. Once the story took off, they would try to say they didn't know and they were in turmoil because Chayka fucked off and they were looking for a GM. Bullshit. It was known from the beginning. Miller apologized to every NHL team before the Combine and interviews took place. So thanks to the predictable backlash, make that 4 draft picks pissed away by Arizona in 2020. I see they put as much lip service into progressivism as they do analytics. As for Soderberg and Hall, they didn't have the cap space to bring them back. They're gone. Just the same old song and dance these days. With these past few years, the Arizona Coyotes have not only disgraced themselves this time around, they've disgraced an entire league. Their actions have not only given a black eye to the sport, but they've gone against every single thing they were said to be a proponent of. Analytics, progressivism, dignity. John Chayka's tenure was merely one of showmanship and sweet lies that tasted good on the ears. And his actions locked the team into being a fringe playoff contender with significant damage to fix. Now, if Bill Armstrong can do it or not is to be determined. He somehow got Ottawa to part with a second-round pick for rapidly declining Derek Stepan, so early signs seem positive. But the same question remains. Can this team survive in Phoenix? They're still doing a year-to-year lease, and elements out of their control may jeopardize the plan. It's awfully convenient of them being moved to the Central Division when they've been linked to Houston in the past, and technically still are. I just wonder when the NHL will actually pull the plug on this disaster in the desert. At this point, I'll just breathe a sigh of relief to it being over.